Memorial now in the square, and several times as I've been back, I've visited the cemetery on the hill where 71 young people, one is a toddler, they're Serbs, Croats, and Muslims, are buried. A chapter of my book is devoted to that episode. By 1996, other than for mines, election workers were reasonably safe thanks to the NATO S4 troops. Although we experienced a couple evacuations, the only OSC personnel injury I'm aware of was someone having his wrist broken in an auto accident. S4, especially the British, were thorough in our landmine awareness training. After I got back home each time from Bosnia, I didn't want to step on grassy areas. I had been so well indoctrinated. So I guess it's not too much of a surprise that I have included landmines in my book. After security briefings and other instruction, we volunteers were deemed ready to work at polling stations and registration and with commissions. Much as I loved the scenic mountains and the valleys and the rivers and the towns, it was the people who impressed me the most, with their stories that were both grim and happy. Diana was my interpreter on my third trip to Bosnia. That was for registration, and I spent over a month in or near the town of Prnjavor, which is in the Republika Srpska. Established by the Dayton Accords, the Republic of Serbia is half of BiH. Diana and I worked hard, and we also had a rollicking good time. Our driver was a husky blonde fellow named Sasha, who the election staff called Bambi. The committee was made up of 6 people. The judge was the head of it. And the others were a former soldier who had lost a leg in the war, a war widow, a man whose business had folded because of the war, and a woman whose family had been displaced from Sarajevo. I treasured their including me in their lives, and I found them increasingly inspiration for a story that was forming in my head. Not only did I enjoy the committee, but I also enjoyed knowing Diana's family. There were a lot of grim tales to take away from Bosnia, but there were also happy and funny ones. I'm pleased to say that I can add Diana's wedding to the happy and funny. In 2004, in Prnjavor, she invited me and my buddy Robert to come back. She had worked with him later. We both had friends and memories there, so it was a great joy for us to return to the town. Diana pulled out all the stops. She drew on many Serbian customs for her wedding, including the false bride. Pre-ceremony festivities were at Diana's parents' small house, where she and her brother also lived. With the groom's family assembled at the bottom of the steps, porch steps, Sani, Diana's brother, presented a suspiciously large, white-gowned, white-veiled prospect, a man in disguise, for the groom's family's consideration. After much raucous bartering back and forth, the groom's family declined. They also refused the second similar offering. The third bride was Diana, and after much back and forth discussion, she was chosen, and we all proceeded to the Serbian Orthodox Church for the wedding. There's a photo in the book of the false bride. Memories began to drop like coins into a bank as I continued to develop my novel. I remembered back to 1996, driving through Karlovac, and I had wondered then what happened to the Serbs who were driven out. And then one day I met one of them. It was during registration, and Diana and I were checking out an elementary school. We discovered a walkway that led to a small building, and were wondering about the brown burlap that covered several doors. And then a short woman in a black skirt and blouse stepped out. She offered us coffee, the common custom in Bosnia. We accepted, also the common custom in Bosnia. Another woman, similarly dressed, came out and joined us, and we sat on rickety chairs outside their simple rooms as they told us about being displaced persons. Now, in the book, I have fictionalized Vida's story, changing her name and the place she came from. One thing I left as she told it to me. She said the only thing she could take out with her was her 3 grandchildren, and she was so grateful to be able to do that. She was actually from Sanski Most. I didn't know then that I would spend 5 weeks in 2000 in Sanski Most, hearing the tales from the other side. Sanski Most was my 6th and last election job in Bosnia, although I went on to Serbia and Kosovo. Sanski Most had been predominantly a Muslim town, and it was the last town recaptured by the Bosnian army before the peace agreement was signed. My interpreter there was a lovely 21-year-old named Amila. When the Serbs overran the town, her father, who had been with the Yugoslav army but resigned, was arrested. Amila, her mother, and her older sister were ordered, along with every other Muslim in town, to pack a bag and gather at the bridge. When they got there, their bags were confiscated, and all of them, the crowd, mostly women and children, were shoved into boxcars and sent east. Her story has a good ending in that her father was released after several months and joined the family in England for the duration of the war. My driver in Sanski Most was Sadmir, a delightful young man in his mid-20s. One morning after we had gotten to know each other for a week or so, he pulled into the parking place and stopped. And he pulled out of his wallet a piece of paper that he unfolded and handed to me. At the top of the paper was the designation of the International Red Cross. In the center was a picture of Sadmir as he was released from the infamous Omarska prison. The picture, the face, was Sadmir. The body was that of a skeleton. But Amila's and Sadmir's stories would not be complete if I didn't tell you about 2 other experiences. One day we were visiting some of my 39 far-flung stations. We were in a somewhat desolate mountain area, and Amila was in the front of the car with Sadmir. They were giggling as they hatched a plot to disguise me as a Muslim woman, complete with full covering burqa, and sell me as a 20-year-old bride. Well, we had so much fun it was hard to believe all the terror and grief that they'd been through, and I admired so much their strength and resilience. I had more to discover that day, or another day, when we stopped at a brand new pristine cemetery where the bodies of recently discovered people from a mass grave were buried.